The judge hadn't even finished speaking when Nathan Brooks leaned across the table and said, quietly but clearly enough for Evelyn to hear, "I never loved you the way you needed. I think we both know that." He didn't shout it. He didn't have to. He said it the way someone states a fact they've rehearsed until it stopped hurting them. Flat, clean, final. The courtroom felt smaller after those words. Evelyn kept her eyes on the papers in front of her and signed her name where the attorney pointed. Her hand was steady. That was the thing she would remember longest. How steady her hand was, even as everything inside her came apart. If this story already has you feeling something, hit that like button, drop the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled, and stay with me all the way to the end. You won't want to walk away from this one. The courthouse on Garfield Street smelled like floor wax and old paper, the way civic buildings always do, as though the air itself had been stamped and filed. Evelyn Carter had been inside that building 3 times in her life. Once for jury duty, she was excused from after 2 hours. Once when her mother's estate needed probating. And now this. She sat in the hallway outside Family Courtroom 4 with her hands folded in her lap, watching the scuffed tile between her shoes. Her attorney, a practical woman named Diane Marsh who wore sensible flats and kept her hair in a clip, was speaking to someone on her phone a few feet away, voice low, nodding. The hearing had been scheduled for 9. It was 8:52. Nathan was already inside. She knew this because she had arrived late on purpose, something she'd never done in 11 years of marriage because Nathan ran on schedule, and she had spent 11 years quietly reshaping herself around his rhythms. She had arrived at 8:48, which was 4 minutes before she needed to be there, and still 8 minutes after he would have arrived. Old habits, even the ones born from accommodation, were hard to kill entirely. She heard his voice once through the door before it closed again. A question to his attorney, something about paperwork. And she recognized the cadence of it before she could make out the words. That was the thing no one told you about long marriages. You could pick your spouse's voice out of noise the way you could pick out a smell from your childhood. It bypassed language entirely and went straight to the chest. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs. The door opened and Diane came back, tucking her phone away. "They're ready for us." The proceeding itself was briefer than Evelyn had expected. She didn't know why that surprised her. She'd known divorces to take months of scheduling and argument, but she and Nathan had no children, had kept their finances largely separate out of what she'd called practicality, and he'd called independence, and they'd already signed off on the division of the house in writing 3 weeks prior. There was nothing left to argue about. That was, she would think later, precisely the problem. By the end, there had been nothing left to argue about. The judge was a heavy-set man named Judge Caldwell, who had the look of someone who had seen every version of this particular story and had long since made his peace with all of them. He reviewed the paperwork, asked each of them 2 or 3 questions in a tone that was not unkind, and then set his pen down with a finality that was almost gentle. Nathan said what he said, the thing about never loving her the way she needed. And Evelyn signed her name. Outside afterward, she took the side stairwell down rather than the elevator because she knew Nathan would take the elevator. She needed the extra 30 seconds. The women's restroom on the ground floor was single occupancy, a small beige room with a paper towel dispenser and a mirror that had a crack running diagonally through the lower right corner. She had noticed that crack on her first visit to this building years ago, and it had spread maybe an inch since then. She stood in front of it now and looked at herself, and then she reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and took out the test. She had taken it 4 days ago in the bathroom of her apartment, the apartment she'd moved into 3 months before, after she and Nathan stopped pretending the house on Caldwell Lane was still a home. She'd been sitting on the edge of the tub with the window cracked, listening to the street noise outside, when the second line appeared. She had not cried. She'd sat there for a long time, and then she'd put the test in the pocket of her jacket and walked out to the kitchen and made herself a cup of tea she didn't drink. She hadn't told anyone. Not Diane, not her sister Claire, not Nathan. Now she stood in the cracked mirror of a courthouse bathroom on the day her marriage ended and held the test in both hands, looking at it. The second line was still there. It didn't care about what day it was. She thought about what would happen if she walked back upstairs. If she knocked on the door where Nathan and his attorney were gathering their things and said, "Wait, there's something you need to know." She could picture his face, the way the expression would shift, the recalculation happening behind his eyes. He was not a cruel man. She had never thought he was cruel. He would feel obligated. He would stay for the wrong reasons, and he would resent her for it quietly. For years, in the way he already resented her for things she'd never fully understood. She had spent 11 years trying to understand those resentments. She was tired. She tore the test in half, then in half again. The plastic casing was harder than the paper strip, and it took more force than she expected. She kept going until the pieces were small, and then she pushed them down into the trash bin under the paper towels, deep enough that they weren't visible from above. She washed her hands twice. She dried them. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror one more time, and then she left. Nathan was standing near the main entrance when she came around the corner of the hallway. He was in his coat, a dark gray one she'd helped him pick out 2 winters ago, and he was looking at his phone, but he looked up when he heard her footsteps. For a moment, neither of them said anything. "Hey," he said finally. Not hello, not her name. Just hey, the way you might address someone you'd run into unexpectedly at a gas station. "Hey," she said. He looked like he was going to say something else. His mouth opened slightly and then closed again, and something moved across his face, not quite regret, not quite apology. Something underneath both of those things that she couldn't name and probably never would. "Evelyn? I have to go," she said. "Diane's waiting." She walked past him toward the door and out into the gray November air. She heard him say her name once more from somewhere behind her. Evelyn. But she kept walking. She did not turn around. She told herself later that she had not turned around because there was nothing left to say, and that was true as far as it went. But the whole truth was more complicated, and she knew it, and she chose not to look at it too closely in the months that followed. She had a lot of practice by then at not looking at things too closely. The apartment she'd rented was on the 4th floor of a building in Mill Haven, a mid-sized city that sat between 2 larger ones and had enough of both their qualities to feel like neither. She'd chosen it for the light, east-facing windows that caught the morning, and for the distance from the neighborhood where she and Nathan had lived. Not so far that she'd had to change anything practical. Far enough that she wouldn't drive past the house on Caldwell Lane by accident. Her sister Claire came over that first night with a bottle of wine and a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, and they sat on the floor of the near-empty living room because the couch wasn't arriving until Thursday. Claire was 41, 2 years older than Evelyn, and she had the quality that some older siblings develop of being able to say difficult things in a voice that was somehow still kind. "You doing okay?" Claire asked. "I'm fine." "That's not the same as okay." "I know." Claire poured wine into the 2 mugs she'd found in a box because the glasses weren't unpacked, and she handed one to Evelyn and sat back against the wall. "What happens now?" "I go back to work Monday. I've got the Hartwell account to finish." Evelyn worked in financial consulting, private clients, estate planning, the quiet management of money that people wanted handled carefully and without fuss. She was good at it. She'd built her client base over 7 years into something stable and self-sustaining, which was one of the things Nathan had sometimes seemed proud of and sometimes seemed obscurely irritated by. She'd never been entirely sure which response she was going to get. "I don't mean work," Claire said. "I know what you mean." "Evelyn." "I'm going to be fine, Claire. I really am." She drank some of the wine. "I made my decision. Both of us did. It's over. I just need to move forward." Claire looked at her for a moment in that particular way she had, the one that meant she knew she was only being told part of the story. But she didn't push. She had learned over the years that pushing Evelyn on things she'd decided not to share was like pushing on a wall, not because Evelyn was hiding anything out of malice, but because she had this way of compartmentalizing that Claire found both impressive and slightly frightening. They ate the chicken out of the container and talked about other things. Claire's kids, a renovation she was doing on her back deck, a neighbor dispute involving a property line and an aggressive hedge. Normal, grounding, necessary things. By 10 o'clock, Evelyn was tired in the way that had less to do with the hour and more to do with the weight she'd been carrying all day, and Claire seemed to sense it. "Get some sleep," Claire said, pulling on her coat. She hugged Evelyn at the door, long enough to mean something. "Call me tomorrow." "I will." After Claire left, Evelyn stood in the kitchen for a while, listening to the building settle. The refrigerator hummed, a car passed on the street below. She put her hand flat against her stomach and stood there for a moment, and then she turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. Well, she told her OB, Dr. Sandra Reyes, at the appointment she'd made for the following week. Dr. Reyes was a no-nonsense woman in her early 50s who had been Evelyn's doctor for 6 years and who received the news without visible surprise. "How far along?" she asked, reviewing the chart. 7 weeks, I think. Maybe 8. "We'll confirm with ultrasound today." Dr. Reyes made a note. Then she looked up. "And the father?" A small pause. "We're not together." "Does he know?" "No." Another pause, longer this time. Dr. Reyes set her pen down. She wasn't the kind of doctor who editorialized, but she had opinions, and they were visible in certain moments, in the slight adjustment of her expression. "That's your call to make," she said finally. "But I want you to think about it carefully, and not just from a legal standpoint." "I have thought about it," Evelyn said. "I've thought about nothing else for a week." "And?" "And I'm going to raise this baby, on my own." She said it carefully, the way you say something you've worked out in advance, because she had, lying awake in the apartment with the east-facing windows, listening to the traffic, working through the arithmetic of it. She had money, she had her career, she had Claire. She had the particular kind of competence that was both a gift and a habit, and she would use it. "I'm not going to tell him." Dr. Reyes held her gaze for a moment. "All right," she said at last. "Not in agreement necessarily, just acknowledgement. Let's do the ultrasound." The baby was there on the screen, a small, formless brightness, heartbeat visible as a rapid flutter that made Evelyn catch her breath despite herself. She'd expected to feel afraid. She did feel afraid, but underneath that, something else. Something she didn't have a word for yet and wouldn't for several more weeks. A settling. A decision being made not in her mind but somewhere lower, older, less arguable. She drove home afterward through the gray afternoon and called no one. Liam arrived in late July of the following year, at 6:23 in the morning, into a hospital room where Evelyn's sister Claire and Claire's wife Dana were the only other people present. He weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces. He had a lot of dark hair and a furious expression that softened within minutes into something merely serious. He looked, immediately and unavoidably, like his father. The same line of jaw, the same set of the brow. Evelyn noticed this at once and said nothing about it to anyone. "He's beautiful," Claire said, and her voice caught. "Evelyn, he's absolutely beautiful." "I know," Evelyn said. She was exhausted in a way that went past words. She held him against her chest, and he made a small, disgruntled noise and then went still, and that was that. The deal was done. She named him Liam James Carter, Carter being her name. On the birth certificate, under father, she wrote unknown. It was the first lie she had told on an official document in her adult life, and she knew it was a lie as she wrote it, and she wrote it anyway. She told herself it was for practical reasons. She didn't want a custody dispute, didn't want Nathan back in her life in the unwanted way that co-parenting would require, didn't want Liam growing up watching two people who'd failed each other try to manage something civil across a conference table. She believed all of those things. She also knew they weren't the whole story. The whole story was that she was afraid, not of Nathan exactly, of what it would cost to admit what she'd done, walking out of that courthouse without saying a word, and of having to watch Nathan look at her with the knowledge of it. She could handle many things. She wasn't sure she could handle that, so she didn't tell him. And then another month passed without telling him, and then a year, and then the choice receded from something she was making into something that had already been made, and the two became indistinguishable. And that was how she learned that some omissions become their own kind of architecture. You build around them long enough and they become load-bearing. By the time Liam was 2, Evelyn had settled into a version of life that worked. It was not the life she'd imagined in her 20s, but she had reached an age, 35, then 36, where she'd started to understand that the life you imagined in your 20s was mostly a projection, a placeholder, and the actual business of living happened in the adjustments. She moved to a larger apartment when Liam was 18 months old, still in Millhaven, but on a quieter street with a park 3 blocks away. She reduced her client load to accommodate daycare pickup. She learned to make dinner one-handed while Liam sat in his high chair and threw Cheerios with the methodical focus of someone conducting experiments. She learned what it was to be so tired that making a decision about what to eat for dinner felt like a genuine cognitive task, and she also learned what it was to wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of a small person saying "Mama" in the dark, and to feel that despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the fear and the things she'd done on that courthouse bathroom floor, she was doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing. She didn't date. Claire asked about this periodically, in the gentle but persistent way of someone who had come to terms with her own happiness and wanted it for the people she loved. Evelyn gave the same answer each time, which was a version of "not yet," and Claire never pushed further. She suspected Claire understood more than she said. She thought about Nathan sometimes, unavoidably. When Liam laughed, a sudden, delighted laugh he'd developed around age 2, total and unstinting, she thought about Nathan. When Liam set his jaw in concentration over a puzzle or a drawing, the expression was so specifically Nathan's that it sometimes stopped her in the middle of whatever she was doing. She never said this out loud. She filed it away with the other things she filed away, in the tidy internal cabinet that was getting heavier by the year. She told herself she was protecting Liam from a complicated situation. She told herself Liam didn't need what he didn't know. She told herself that Nathan hadn't tried to find her. No calls, no letters, nothing. And that this confirmed what she'd already believed, which was that he'd moved on cleanly, the way he did everything. She didn't let herself wonder what Nathan's silence meant. That was another thing she had learned not to look at too closely. When Liam was 3, he got a cold that turned into an ear infection, that turned into a very long night in an urgent care clinic. He sat in her lap the whole time, his head heavy against her shoulder, his breathing congested and miserable, and she talked to him quietly and read to him from her phone and felt, in the particular lonely way of single parents at 2 a.m, the acute weight of doing this alone. The doctor that night was a young resident who was kind and competent and examined Liam with the careful attention of someone who was still new enough to the job to give it everything. When she left to write the prescription, Liam looked up at Evelyn with his red-rimmed eyes and said, "Where's Daddy?" She had been expecting this question for 3 years. She had prepared for it. She had talked to a child psychologist friend of Claire's about how to handle it, had rehearsed answers in the shower, had thought about honesty and age appropriateness, and what a 3-year-old could actually hold. "Daddy isn't here right now," she said. "But you've got me, and Aunt Claire and Aunt Donna." He considered this with the gravitas that was very specific to him. Then he leaned his head back against her shoulder. "Okay," he said. She held him tighter and stared at the wall behind the examining table and felt the weight of what she'd done with a clarity that was, in that particular moment, almost unbearable. But she didn't call Nathan that night. She drove home with the antibiotic prescription, put Liam in his bed, and sat on her own bed in the dark for a long time, and then she lay down without changing her clothes and eventually fell asleep. The years accumulated the way years do, in smaller increments than you expect when you're watching from inside them. Liam turned 4 and then 5 and became, by degrees, a specific person rather than just a child. He was quiet in crowds and loud at home. He liked drawing, not coloring, specifically drawing, filling notebooks with his own invented landscapes and creatures. He was slow to warm to new people, but fierce once he decided he liked you. He asked questions constantly and waited for the answers with genuine patience, which Evelyn privately considered his most remarkable quality. He was, she thought sometimes with a mix of pride and something more complicated, a very good person. She wasn't entirely sure she deserved the credit for that. He started kindergarten in September of the year he turned 5. 2 weeks into the school year, he came home with a drawing of their family, himself, Evelyn, Claire, and Dana, for a class project called My People. His teacher had sent a note home asking if there was a father to include. Evelyn had written back, "Liam's father is not in the picture. Please note the family as depicted." The teacher, a thoughtful woman named Mrs. Okonkwo, who was very good at reading between lines, didn't ask again. The following winter, Liam turned 6. He was, as he had always been, a healthy child. Occasional colds, one case of strep throat, the usual catalog of minor childhood ailments. He had never been hospitalized. He had never had anything that Evelyn had thought of as serious. So when she picked him up from after-school care in late February and noticed that he looked pale, not just tired pale, but off in some more specific way, a grayness around his mouth, she told herself it was probably nothing. He'd seemed fine that morning. Kids could turn fast and turn back just as fast. But he didn't turn back. By that evening, he had a fever of 102, and he wasn't interested in dinner, and when she took him to the bathroom before bed, he vomited suddenly and completely, and that frightened her in a way that was past normal sick child worry. She took him to the emergency room at Millhaven General at 9 o'clock that night. They were seen quickly, which turned out to be its own kind of ominous signal, because emergency rooms that move quickly generally do so for a reason. The attending physician was a man named Dr. Alvarez, compact and precise, who examined Liam with particular attention and ordered labs. Evelyn sat in the plastic chair beside the bed holding Liam's hand. He'd stopped being actively sick and had lapsed into a heavy, not quite right sleep, which scared her more than the vomiting had. She waited. She answered questions from the nurse. She texted Claire, who texted back immediately. "On my way." When Dr. Alvarez came back, he had a colleague with him, a woman introduced as Dr. Fiona Holt, a pediatric hematologist. Hematologist. The word landed before Dr. Alvarez said another word. "Mrs. Carter," he began. "Ms.?" she said automatically. "Ms. Carter. We've reviewed Liam's preliminary labs and we'd like to run some additional tests. I want to be upfront with you about what we're looking for." He paused. "Liam's blood work shows some abnormalities. We're not in a position to give you a definitive answer tonight, but we want to get him admitted so we can do more comprehensive testing tomorrow morning." She looked at him. "What kind of abnormalities?" The two doctors exchanged a brief look. "His white cell count is elevated, and we're seeing some irregularities in his red cell production that we need to investigate more closely." Dr. Holt's voice was careful and calm. "This is early stage. We don't want to speculate, but we do want to move quickly." "Move quickly," Evelyn repeated. "Yes?" She looked at Liam, sleeping in the narrow hospital bed with the thin blanket pulled up to his chin. She thought about his drawing, the one from last fall, My People. 4 figures. Himself and his aunt and his aunt's wife and his mother, the family she had built from the pieces she had. "Okay," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands, she noticed, were not. "Tell me what you need from me." Claire arrived 20 minutes later and found Evelyn in the hallway outside Liam's room, and without saying anything, she put her arms around her sister and held on. Evelyn let herself be held for exactly as long as she could afford to, which was not very long. "He's going to be okay," Claire said. "You don't know that yet," Evelyn said. "No," Claire agreed, "but I need to say it anyway." Evelyn pulled back. Her eyes were dry. She had cried very little in the last 6 years, and she wasn't going to start now, in a hospital hallway, where Liam might wake up and see her. "I need to talk to the doctors again in the morning. I need to understand exactly what they're looking at." "Okay?" "And I need you to take tomorrow off." "Already texted my boss," Claire said. They sat together in the hallway chairs through most of the night, taking turns checking on Liam, drinking bad coffee from the vending machine. Around 3 in the morning, Evelyn put her head back against the wall and stared at the ceiling tiles and thought about the life she had constructed, carefully, deliberately, with great effort, and how it had always felt to her like the result of choices she had made for the right reasons, and how it was only in moments like this one, when everything went still and quiet and the ordinary scaffolding fell away, that she could see the single gap in the foundation she had built everything else around. She had never let herself think about what would happen if Liam needed something she couldn't provide alone. She was thinking about it now. The tests the following morning took several hours. Dr. Holt was thorough and spoke to Evelyn plainly, which Evelyn was grateful for. The results came back in the early afternoon, and they confirmed what Dr. Holt had suspected. Liam had a condition affecting his bone marrow's ability to produce healthy red blood cells. It was manageable, treatable, but it would require more than just medication. Depending on how the next few weeks went, he might need a marrow donor, a compatible one. The closest compatible match is almost always a biological parent, Dr. Holt said. She said it without any particular emphasis, but Evelyn heard the weight of it. "I'll be tested," Evelyn said immediately. "Of course. We'll run your panel today." A pause. "Ms. Carter, I have to ask, is Liam's father in the picture at all?" The question sat in the room between them. Evelyn looked at her hands, then back up at Dr. Holt. The doctor's expression was neutral, professional, but genuinely asking. "No," Evelyn said, "he's not." "Is there any way to contact him? For medical purposes, we need to know his history, and if it comes to needing a donor match, biological parents are our best chance." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'll see what I can do." She left the consultation room and walked down the corridor to the family lounge, which was empty at that hour, except for a man asleep in the corner chair. She stood at the window and looked out at the parking lot and the gray February sky above it, and she put her hand in her pocket and found nothing there. No test to tear up, no decision to defer. There was nothing left to defer. She took out her phone. She opened her contacts. His name was still there. She had never deleted it, which was something she had never examined too closely. She stood at the window for another full minute, and then she did something she had not done in 6 years. She looked up Nathan Brooks. He was in Arden, she found, about 2.5 hours north of Millhaven. He'd moved there 4 years ago, according to the LinkedIn profile she pulled up. He was working in architectural project management, which was adjacent to what he'd been doing when she knew him. The profile photo was recent enough. He looked older, a little grayer at the temples, but recognizably himself. The same jaw, the same careful set of his expression. She stared at it for longer than she meant to. She didn't call, not yet. She told herself she needed to wait for her own test results first, that maybe she would be a match, that maybe she could handle this without opening the door she'd kept closed for 6 years. She told herself this was a reasonable, measured approach. She also knew, even as she told herself this, that it was one more version of the same story she'd been telling herself for 6 years, that waiting was different from deciding. But she waited anyway. 3 more days, while Liam underwent additional testing, while she gave blood for her own compatibility panel, while she sat beside his bed reading to him and watching his face, and telling him it was going to be okay in a voice she worked very hard to keep steady. The results from her panel came back on the morning of the 4th day. She was not a match. Dr. Holt told her gently. She asked if there were other biological relatives. Evelyn told her about her own blood work, told her that her side of the family had already been considered. "And the father?" Dr. Holt asked again. Evelyn looked at Liam through the glass partition. He was awake, working on a drawing at the bedside table, his small face serious with concentration. "I'll call him today," she said. She meant it this time. She walked out to the hospital parking garage because she needed air and privacy both, and she sat in her car with the heat running and her phone in her hand, and she made herself dial before she could find another reason not to. It rang 3 times. Then, "Hello?" She hadn't thought about how it would feel to hear his voice. She thought she had. She'd been thinking about it for 4 days. But the actual experience of it was different from whatever she'd imagined. It wasn't the voice she'd heard through that courtroom door, not the flat, final voice that said, "I never loved you the way you needed." It was just Nathan, the way he'd always answered the phone, a little cautious, a little questioning, waiting to see who it was before he committed to a tone. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She tried again. "Nathan," she said, "it's Evelyn." A silence. Not long, 3 seconds, maybe 4, but the kind that carries weight. Then, "Evelyn." "Yes." Another pause. She could hear him breathing. Yeah. Hi." A short, disbelieving sound, not quite a laugh. "It's been a while." "It has." Her voice was even. She was grateful for the thing in her that defaulted to even. "Nathan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you respond." He said nothing. She took that as permission. "I have a son," she said. "He's 6 years old. His name is Liam, and he's yours." The silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough that Evelyn pulled the phone from her ear to check the connection. The call was still live. 4 bars. 41 seconds elapsed. "Nathan," she said, "I heard you." His voice had changed, flattened in a way that wasn't anger yet, or not only anger, something more like the sound a person makes when they've been hit somewhere unexpected and the body hasn't decided yet how to respond. "Say it again." "I have a son. He's 6. His name is Liam. He's yours." Another silence, shorter this time. Then, "You've had a son for 6 years." "Yes." "And you're calling me now." It wasn't a question. She recognized the syntax. It was the thing Nathan did when he was working very hard to stay controlled, stringing together statements in place of the thing he actually wanted to say. She had heard that syntax many times in the last 2 years of their marriage. "He's sick," she said. "He's in Millhaven General. He has a condition. His bone marrow isn't producing correctly, and he may need a donor. I was tested. I'm not a match. The doctors need to test his biological father." The breathing on the other end shifted, audible, unsteady. "What kind of condition?" "A bone marrow disorder. Dr. Holt, his pediatric hematologist, can explain it better than I can, but Nathan, it's serious. That's why I'm calling. I wouldn't—" She stopped, restarted. "I know what this is. I know what I'm telling you and what it means. I'm not asking you to—" "Which hospital?" he said. "Millhaven General, 6th floor, pediatric ward, room—" "I'll be there in 3 hours." The line went dead. She sat in the parking garage for another few minutes with the phone in her lap. The engine was still running. Heat came out of the vents. She thought about this version of this moment she'd imagined over 6 years, usually late at night, in the way you imagine worst-case scenarios, not because you want them, but because your mind insists on running the drill. She had imagined shouting. She had imagined Nathan's particular contained fury, the way it went cold rather than hot. She had imagined lawyers. She had not imagined him saying which hospital and hanging up. She didn't know if that was better or worse. She suspected she was about to find out. She told Claire before she went back upstairs. They were standing in the hallway outside the elevator, and Claire listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Evelyn loved most about her sister, and sometimes found most unnerving. When Evelyn finished, Claire was quiet for a moment. "He's coming today," Claire said. "He said 3 hours." Claire looked at her watch. It was just past 11. "Okay." She exhaled slowly. "How are you?" "I'm functional." "That's also not the same as okay." "Claire." I know. She rubbed her face. "Does Liam know anything yet?" "No, I need to tell him something before Nathan gets here." Evelyn pressed the elevator button. "I don't want him to meet a stranger who turns out to be his father. That's not— I can't do that to him." Claire nodded slowly. "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth, a version of it." Evelyn stared at the elevator doors. "Enough that he's not blindsided." "And the rest of it?" "The rest of it will have to wait until he's better." The doors opened. "Everything has to wait until he's better." She went into Liam's room and spent a few minutes just sitting beside him, watching him finish his drawing. He was illustrating something. She could make out trees and what appeared to be a very large bird of some kind, and a small figure that might have been a person or might have been a particularly ambitious rock formation. His concentration was absolute. "Mom," he said, without looking up. "What are the biggest birds in the world?" "Ostriches," she said. "But they can't fly." "I know they can't fly. I mean the biggest ones that can fly." "Condors, I think, or wandering albatrosses." He made a small, satisfied sound and added something to the drawing. Then he looked up at her. He had her coloring, the dark eyes, the darker hair. But the expression he was wearing right now was his father's, alert, waiting, reading the room. "Something's happening," he said. She had never been able to hide much from him. "Yeah," she said. "I need to talk to you about something." He put his pen down and gave her his full attention. That was the other thing about Liam. When he decided you were worth attending to, he attended completely. 6 years old, and he listened like a 40-year-old. "You know how I've told you that your dad and I weren't together?" she began. "Yeah, you said it didn't work out." "That's right. And I told you that your dad didn't know about you." She watched his face. He was listening, processing. Well, I called him this morning because the doctor said they might need to check if he can help you get better, and he... She paused. He's coming here. Today. To meet you. Liam looked at her steadily. My dad is coming here? Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Is he mad? She wanted to say no. She said, I think he has a lot of feelings right now. That's probably pretty normal, considering. She reached out and took his hand. But whatever he's feeling, it has nothing to do with you. You understand that? It's about you, Liam said. Partly about me, yeah. He thought about this. Is he nice? She considered the question seriously, the way he deserved. He was, she said. When I knew him. Did you love him? The question landed without warning, the way his questions often did. Not cruel, not manipulative, just genuinely curious, asking the thing that occurred to him without filtering it first. She had tried to raise him to do exactly that, and sometimes it caught her entirely off guard. Yes, she said. I did. He nodded once, the way he did when he'd received information and was filing it. Then he picked his pen back up. Okay, he said. I want to finish my bird before he gets here. She sat with him while he drew, and she did not say anything else, and the room was quiet except for the soft sound of the pen on paper and the hospital sounds coming in under the door, and she thought about what it meant to have told those particular truths out loud for the first time to the one person they mattered most to. It hadn't destroyed anything. That was what she noticed first, and then felt ashamed for being surprised by it. Nathan arrived at 2:17 in the afternoon. Evelyn knew because she was in the hallway near the nurse's station when the elevator opened and he stepped out looking like a man who had driven 2.5 hours without stopping, coat still on, a bag slung over one shoulder, his face carrying the particular texture of someone who had been very focused for several hours on not feeling what he was feeling. He saw her immediately. They stood about 15 feet apart. Neither of them moved for a moment. He looked older, not in a bad way, just in the way that 6 years looks on someone you knew well. There was more gray at his temples than the LinkedIn photo had suggested. He was thinner. He was also, she noticed with a complicated sensation, still entirely recognizable as Nathan. The set of the shoulders, the way he stood slightly forward on the balls of his feet, the quality of attention in his eyes that had always made her feel when they first met, that he was genuinely interested in whatever she was saying. Right now those eyes were doing something she couldn't quite read. Nathan, she said. Where is he? Room 614. He knows you're coming. She paused. I told him this morning. Something moved across Nathan's face. Not softening, exactly, but a shift. What did you tell him? That I called you, that you were coming, that you and I didn't work out, and you didn't know about him, and now you do. He was quiet for a moment. Did he ask why you didn't tell me? No. Kids are smarter than we think, Nathan said. It wasn't quite an accusation. It also wasn't not one. I know, she said. They walked down the hallway without speaking. Evelyn's heart was doing something unpleasant, and she was managing it by keeping her breathing even and her eyes forward. She stopped outside room 614 and put her hand on the door, and then stopped. I need to say something before we go in, she said. Evelyn, just let me say it. She turned to face him. He was close, closer than he'd been in 6 years, and she had forgotten what it was like to be in physical proximity to someone you'd once known completely, how disorienting the familiarity was when everything else had changed. Whatever you need to say to me, whatever you're feeling right now, I deserve all of it. I'm not going to argue with any of it, but not in front of him, not today. Nathan held her gaze. His jaw was tight. You think I was going to walk in there, and I don't know what you're going to do. I haven't known you for 6 years. He looked away. A muscle worked in his cheek. Then, I'm not going to say anything in front of him. His voice was very quiet and very controlled. I came here for him, not for this. She nodded. She pushed the door open. Liam was sitting up in bed. He'd put away the drawing. She noticed it folded on the bedside table. And he was watching the door with his particular quality of alert waiting, the one that looked right now, exactly like his father, about to receive information he wasn't sure of. Nathan stopped just inside the door. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it had the quality of something much longer. The two of them looking at each other for the first time, Liam with his straight-backed watchfulness, and Nathan with something in his expression that Evelyn could not have described and did not try to. She watched Nathan's face change, watched him absorb it, the jaw, the brow, the eyes that were Evelyn's but the arrangement that was his own. This small person who was incontrovertibly his and who he had never once known existed. "Hi," Liam said. Nathan cleared his throat. "Hey." He took another step into the room. "I'm Nathan." "I know," Liam said. "Mom told me." Nathan glanced at Evelyn, quick, unreadable, and then back at Liam. "How are you feeling?" "Okay. My arm hurts where they keep doing the needle thing, but other than that." He looked at Nathan with frank appraisal. "You look like me." The smallest sound escaped Nathan then. Not a laugh, not quite, but something adjacent. "Yeah," he said. "I was thinking the same thing." "Mom said you do project management." "I do." "What is that?" Nathan moved to the chair beside the bed, the one Evelyn usually occupied, and sat down in it. She noticed he didn't ask. He just sat, the way you sit somewhere you've decided you have some right to be. She didn't say anything. She pulled the other chair from the corner. "It means I help make sure buildings get built the way they're supposed to," Nathan said. "When architects design something, someone has to make sure all the different people building it are working together. That's kind of what I do." Liam considered this. "Like a boss?" "Kind of. More like a coordinator." "Mrs. Okonkwo says I'm a good coordinator in class." He paused. "She means I'm bossy, but she's being nice about it." Nathan looked at him for a moment. "Are you bossy?" "Sometimes," Liam said without embarrassment. "Mom says I come by it honestly." He glanced at Evelyn. "She means you." Evelyn felt something shift behind her sternum. "I said you come by the organizational instinct honestly," she said, keeping her voice mild. "Same thing," Liam said. Nathan was quiet for a second. Then, "She's probably right." Dr. Holt came by at 4 o'clock, and Nathan sat through the consultation with the focus of someone memorizing every word. He asked clear, specific questions, the kind that told you he'd been reading about it on his phone during the drive, trying to understand the terrain before he arrived. Dr. Holt answered each one fully and without condescension, and by the end of the appointment she had explained that they wanted to run Nathan's compatibility panel as soon as possible, that bone marrow donation was a consideration if the next round of treatments didn't produce the response they were hoping for, and that time was a factor, but not in a way that precluded careful decision-making. "When can we run the panel?" Nathan asked. "We can draw your blood today if you're willing." "Let's do it today," he said. Not, "I'll think about it," not "let me know what the process is," just, "let's do it today." Evelyn watched him from across the room. After Dr. Holt left, Nathan stayed. He didn't ask if he could. He also didn't make a production of it. He just remained in the chair and asked Liam about his drawing, and Liam retrieved it from the bedside table and unfolded it, and they spent 20 minutes in what appeared to be a genuine discussion about the merits of condors versus albatrosses as the subject of dramatic illustration. At 5:30, a nurse came to take Nathan to have his blood drawn, and he stood and told Liam he'd be back in a few minutes. "Okay," Liam said. He was already looking tired, the good afternoon energy fading into the particular exhaustion that illness imposed on him by early evening. "Don't let them make it weird." "The needle thing. They always act like it's going to be fine and then it's not that fine." Nathan glanced at Evelyn briefly. "I'll tell them to be straight with me," he said. "That's what I always do," Liam said. "It doesn't totally work, but it helps." After Nathan left with the nurse, Evelyn helped Liam settle back against the pillows. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the ceiling. "I like him," he said. She adjusted his blanket. "Yeah?" "He listens." Liam turned his head to look at her. "Not like he's being polite, like he actually is." "He always did that," she said, before she could decide whether or not to say it. Liam was watching her. "Are you going to be weird with each other?" "Probably a little bit," she said honestly. "Because of the thing about not telling him?" She looked at him. You figured that out. Mom, I'm 6, not dumb. I know you're not dumb. She sat on the edge of the bed. Yes, there's stuff between your dad and me that we need to figure out. It's complicated. Did you do something wrong? The question was guileless. He wasn't trying to wound her. He was just asking the way he always asked, directly, because he wanted to know. Yes, she said. I did. He absorbed that. Are you going to fix it? I'm going to try. He nodded slowly. Then, I want him to come back tomorrow. I'll ask him. Don't ask him. Just tell him to. She almost smiled. I thought you came by the bossiness from your dad. Maybe I got a double dose, Liam said, and closed his eyes. Nathan came back 20 minutes later and found Liam asleep. He stood in the doorway for a moment looking at the sleeping child, really looking, the way he hadn't allowed himself to do while Liam was awake and watching, and Evelyn saw, for just that moment, what it cost him. The expression on his face was not something she had words for. It was grief and wonder and fury, and something beneath all of those things that was rawer than any of them. He came into the room and sat back down in the chair, and they were both quiet, listening to Liam breathe. After a while, Nathan said very low, "Did you know, when you signed the papers?" She had expected this. She'd known it was coming since the parking garage that morning. Yes, she said. He absorbed that. His hands were clasped between his knees, his eyes still on Liam. How long had you known? 4 days? Another silence. You stood in that courtroom? Yes. And you didn't say anything? No. He exhaled through his nose. Why? She thought about the answer she'd prepared. The one about fear and obligation, and not wanting Liam to grow up in the shadow of a marriage held together by obligation. It was true. It was also, she knew, incomplete. Because I was afraid, she said, of what you'd feel, of what you'd become if you stayed for the wrong reasons, of what I'd become, watching you resent it. That wasn't your choice to make, he said quietly. I know that. You made it anyway. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. Liam shifted slightly in sleep, a small unconscious adjustment, and both of them watched him do it with the automatic attention of people whose entire focus had reorganized around this child's well-being. Nathan's from 2 hours ago, Evelyn's from 6 years, but somehow in this moment both arriving at the same point. I would have stayed, Nathan said. For the wrong reasons, yeah, probably. You weren't wrong about that. He paused. But I would have stayed. I know. And you took that from me. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say to that. He was right, and they both knew it. 6 years, he said. It wasn't aimed at her, not quite. It was just the number, spoken aloud, with the weight of everything it contained. 6 years of a person becoming, of first words and first steps and drawings of condors, and the kind of blunt emotional intelligence that made a 6-year-old ask, did you do something wrong, with perfect calm? 6 years that had happened in a room Nathan had never been allowed to enter. He sat with that for a while, then, he said he likes my listening. She looked at him. You were talking to him for an hour. He told me about his school project, the one about families. A pause. He drew 4 people, said the 4th was going to be a dog they don't have yet. He's been campaigning for a dog since he was 4. What kind? Whatever kind agrees to be drawn repeatedly and included in school projects, apparently. Something close to a smile crossed Nathan's face and then retreated. He's a good kid, Evelyn. I know, she said. And because it was true, because it was the thing she was most certain of in the entire catastrophe of this situation, he's the best thing I've ever done. Nathan looked at her then, really looked at her the way he had in the doorway a few minutes ago. Not past her, not at the situation, but at her specifically. I believe you, he said. The words carried more than their surface meaning, and they both heard it. That doesn't make the rest of it okay. I know. But he stopped. It matters. That he's okay. That you, another stop. He's not afraid of things. No, she said. He never has been. That's not from me. I think it might be, actually. She looked at Liam. You were never afraid of things either. You were just sometimes afraid of what they meant. Nathan was quiet. He didn't agree, and he didn't argue. He sat with it, the way he sometimes used to sit with things she said, not processing them quickly but holding them at a careful distance, deciding later what he thought. That, at least, hadn't changed. At 8 o'clock, the night nurse came in for Liam's evening check, and the activity woke him briefly, enough to register that Nathan was still there, still in the chair. You're still here, Liam said, blinking. Yeah, Nathan said. Is that okay? Liam considered it with the seriousness of the recently asleep. Yeah, he said. You can stay. He was back under within minutes, that quick dive back into sleep that only children do. Nathan didn't leave. He and Evelyn sat in the dim room, and the hours moved in the slow, specific way of hospital nights. Not quiet exactly, but removed from ordinary time. The ordinary sounds replaced by monitors and footsteps in the hall, and the occasional loudspeaker announcement from somewhere in the building. Around 9, Nathan asked about the prognosis. Evelyn told him everything Dr. Holt had said, all of it, because he had the right to all of it. He listened without interrupting. He asked 2 questions when she finished. Around 10, Claire texted to check in, and Evelyn told her Nathan was there and things were... She paused over the word and finally wrote stable, which was not quite accurate about any dimension of the situation, but was the best she could do. Around 11, Nathan said, I need a hotel. There's a Marriott 3 blocks from here. Okay. He stood up slowly, the way people move when they've been sitting for hours and didn't notice. He looked at Liam one more time, that particular look, the one she didn't have words for. Then he pulled on his coat. I'll be back in the morning. He wants you to come back, she said. Liam, he told me. Nathan looked at her. Good, he said. He was almost at the door when she said, Nathan. He stopped but didn't turn. I know it doesn't... She started again. I know an apology isn't the right word for it. For something this size. She paused. But I am sorry, whatever that's worth at this point. He stood with his back to her for a moment. She watched his shoulders. It's worth something, he said finally. I don't know what yet. He left. The door swung closed behind him, and the room settled back into its hospital quiet, and Evelyn sat in her chair beside her sleeping son and put her face in her hands. Not crying, just the posture of someone who has carried something heavy for a very long distance and has finally been allowed to set it down, and discovering that the setting down is not relief exactly, but something more complicated and less clean. She sat like that for a while. Then she straightened up. She checked on Liam. She asked the night nurse for a blanket for herself. She settled back into the chair. She didn't sleep, not really, but she stayed. Nathan came back at 7:15 the next morning with 2 coffees from the place across the street, one black, one with oat milk, no sugar, and he handed the second one to Evelyn without saying anything. She took it and looked at it. He had remembered how she took her coffee. She didn't say anything about this. Neither did he. Liam woke up at 7:30 and saw the coffee in his mother's hand and said, Can I have some? And Evelyn said no, and he said, I figured, and asked Nathan if he'd seen any real condors, and that was how the morning started. Dr. Holt came by at 9 with news on Nathan's panel. They sat together. The 3 of them, Nathan and Evelyn on opposite sides of Liam's bed, and listened to her explain that Nathan's preliminary markers were promising. It would take another 48 hours to confirm, but early indicators suggested he might be a strong match. Liam listened to all of this with his characteristic seriousness. When Dr. Holt finished, he looked at Nathan. So you might be able to fix me. That's what we're trying to find out, Nathan said. Liam nodded. Okay. Then, with a 6-year-old's radar for the emotional temperature of a room, you're both doing that thing where you're trying not to show me you're scared. What thing? Evelyn asked. The too calm thing. He looked between them. It's okay. I can tell. But it's okay. I do the same thing at school when there's a test. Nathan made a sound that was definitely a laugh this time, brief and involuntary, and Evelyn pressed her lips together to hold back her own. "You're a sharp kid," Nathan said. "I know," said Liam, with no vanity whatsoever, just the plain assessment of a person who had been told this enough times to accept it as information. "Mom says it helps to just say the scary thing out loud." "Does it?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes." "What's the scary thing for you right now?" The question sat in the room. Nathan looked at Liam. This boy, his boy, who had his jaw in his mother's eyes and some third thing that was entirely his own, and didn't look away. "That I missed a lot of time," Nathan said quietly, "and I want to make sure I don't miss more." Liam considered this with great care. "Then don't," he said. It was exactly the kind of thing a 6-year-old says, unencumbered by all the complications that make simple things impossible for adults. Nathan heard it that way, Evelyn could see. He didn't smile at it as though it were charming or dismiss it as naive. He sat with it the way he'd been sitting with hard things since he arrived, turning it over, taking it seriously. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." Outside, the February sky was doing something. Clouds breaking slightly, a thin line of pale light along the edge of the horizon. Not warmth, not yet, just the suggestion of it. The reminder that light came back eventually, even after the longest nights, whether you were ready for it or not. Liam picked up his pen and went back to his drawing. Nathan and Evelyn sat on opposite sides of the bed, drinking their respective coffees, and neither of them spoke for a while. There was too much to say, and they both knew it, and they had agreed, without saying so explicitly, that this particular room on this particular morning was not the place for most of it. But they stayed, both of them. Together in the same room for the first time in 6 years, on opposite sides of the child that had been the most consequential secret between them and the most consequential truth. Outside, the thin pale light held. The confirmation came on a Thursday. Dr. Holt found them both in Liam's room. Nathan had settled into a pattern by then, arriving each morning before 8 with 2 coffees and leaving after Liam was asleep, driving back to the Marriott 3 blocks away where he'd extended his stay by another week without discussing it with anyone. He'd called his office on day 2 and arranged to work remotely. He hadn't asked Evelyn's permission for any of this. He had simply stayed, and she had not asked him to leave, and that was the arrangement they had arrived at without naming it. Dr. Holt closed the door behind her and looked at them both and said, "Nathan is a strong match. Better than we hoped, actually." Liam looked up from his sketchbook. "That means he can fix me?" "That means he's the best candidate we have," Dr. Holt said. She sat in the edge of the chair and leaned forward slightly, the posture of someone who had learned to deliver complicated news at eye level with small patience. "We still have some preparatory work to do before we can move forward with the procedure, and I want to walk both your parents through what that involves." "But yes, Liam. This is good news." Liam looked at Nathan. "I told you," he said. Nathan's expression did something complicated. "You told me what?" "That it was going to work out." He said it with the certainty of someone who had not spent enough years on Earth yet to understand that certainty wasn't always warranted, and who was perhaps better off for it. "I told you the first day. You looked really worried." "I wasn't—" Nathan stopped. "Yeah, I was worried." "It's going to work out," Liam said again and went back to his sketchbook. Nathan looked at Evelyn across the bed. She looked back at him. There was nothing to say in front of Liam that could hold what either of them was feeling. The complicated geometry of relief and grief, and the awareness that they were sitting in a room together as parents, a word that had applied to both of them for 6 years, but which had only just this week begun to mean the same thing at the same time. After Dr. Holt left, Nathan excused himself and went out to the hallway. Evelyn watched him go through the small window in the door. He stood with his back against the wall across the corridor, arms crossed, head tipped back slightly, staring at the ceiling. She recognized the posture. It was what Nathan looked like when he was holding something together by the force of his own discipline and needed 30 seconds outside anyone's line of sight to do it. She had not seen that in 6 years. She had not missed seeing it exactly. But she had not forgotten it either. She stayed with Liam. Charson. The preparatory process, Dr. Holt explained over the following 2 days, would take roughly a week. Liam needed a specific course of treatment to prepare his bone marrow to receive the donor cells, a process that would be hard on him, not in a way that was dangerous, but in a way that would make him feel significantly worse before he felt better. She was plain about this because Liam had made it clear from their first meeting that he preferred plain. "Will it hurt?" he asked. "Some of it will be uncomfortable," she said. "We'll manage the pain as much as we can, but I won't tell you it'll be easy." He considered this. "Okay," he said. "I can do uncomfortable." Evelyn watched her son say this and felt the particular swell of emotion that she'd learned over 6 years to manage in real time. The fierce, aching pride of watching a small person be braver than they needed to be. Nathan was sitting beside her when Liam said it, and she felt him shift in his chair. A small movement, barely perceptible. She knew without looking what his face was doing. The preparatory treatment began the following Monday. As Dr. Holt had promised, it was hard. Liam's color dropped and his energy went with it, and there were 2 days in the middle of the week where he was too tired and too nauseated to draw, which was, for Liam, the clearest possible signal that things were genuinely difficult. He didn't complain much. He asked questions when something new happened to his body. "Why does my stomach feel like that? What does that medicine do? How long before this part is over?" And he answered the nurses' questions directly and thanked them when they were done, because Evelyn had raised him to say thank you to people doing a hard job. But the nights were harder. Evelyn stayed every night, sleeping in the reclining chair the ward kept for parents, and she watched him sleep with the particular vigilance of someone who has agreed to keep watch, and means it. On Wednesday night, he woke up at 2 in the morning and was sick, and she was there for it, and afterward he lay back against the pillow looking gray and exhausted and said, "I hate this part." "I know," she said. "How long does the prep take?" "A few more days." He closed his eyes. "Tell me something." "What kind of something?" "Anything. Just talk." He didn't open his eyes. "It helps when you talk." So she talked. She told him about her job, about a client she'd had years ago who'd kept his life savings in 3 different banks because he didn't trust any single one of them, and about how she'd spent 6 months gently organizing his finances without ever directly telling him he was being irrational, just slowly making the alternative more appealing than the original arrangement. She told him about the apartment she'd lived in when she was 24 before she met his father, the one with the radiator that made sounds like someone attempting Morse code. She told him about the first time she'd gone to New York, the summer she was 22, and how she'd gotten on the wrong subway and ended up in a neighborhood she didn't recognize and had eaten the best slice of pizza of her life at a counter where no one spoke to her, and it was perfect. He was asleep by the time she finished the pizza story. She sat in the dim room and listened to him breathe. Nathan arrived at 7:15 the next morning, as he always did, with the coffees, and he took one look at her face and said, "Rough night?" 2 a.m. episode, she said. He handed her the coffee without comment. He looked at Liam still sleeping and sat down and just waited. That was something Evelyn had noticed over the past week. Nathan's quality of patience in this room. He wasn't a patient person by nature. She knew that from 11 years of marriage. He moved fast, processed fast, got restless in situations that didn't progress. But in this room, with Liam, he had a different gear. He sat and he waited and he was entirely present, and it looked less like effort than like something that had simply reorganized itself in him the moment he walked through the door that first day and saw his son. She thought about what it cost him, and then she thought about the fact that she was the one who had made it cost him, and she drank her coffee and didn't say anything. Claire came by that Thursday afternoon, and for the first time since Nathan had arrived, the 4 of them were in the room at the same time: Evelyn, Nathan, Claire, and Liam, who was having a better afternoon and had retrieved his sketchbook. Claire had met Nathan, briefly, twice during the marriage. She had not seen him since the divorce. She walked into the room, registered him, and her face did a brief and entirely involuntary rearrangement before settling into something controlled and civil. "Nathan," she said. "Claire," he said. He stood up, which was a reflex of his that Evelyn had always found slightly formal. "Good to see you." Said Claire, which was a sound that covered a great deal of ground. Liam looked between them with interest. Do you two know each other? We've met, Claire said. She sat in the corner chair and pulled out the book she'd brought Liam, a nature encyclopedia he'd been asking for. I brought you the bird book. Liam's face transformed. The one with the real photographs? The very one. He held out both hands. The afternoon passed in a way that was almost ordinary. Liam poring over the bird book, periodically demanding that specific people look at specific photographs, Claire asking him questions about the pictures with the genuine curiosity that made her such a good aunt. Nathan had moved his chair slightly so that Claire didn't have to look directly at him, a small adjustment that Evelyn noticed and suspected Claire did too, though neither of them acknowledged it. At one point, Liam fell asleep mid-sentence about pelicans, the book still open in his lap, and the three adults were left in quiet. Claire looked at Evelyn, then at Nathan, then at Evelyn again. Her face asked a question that words hadn't been used for yet. We're managing, Evelyn said, which answered it as well as anything. Claire nodded slowly, then to Nathan. Thank you. For coming. She said it carefully, each word individually weighted. For the testing, for... She gestured vaguely at the room, at the week's worth of coffee cups and sustained presence. All of this. Nathan looked at her for a moment. He's my son, he said. Simple, declarative, no edge to it, but also unmistakably clear. Claire absorbed that. Yeah, she said quietly. He is. They sat with that for a while, and nobody said anything else, and Liam slept with the Pelican book open on his chest. The conversation that had been waiting happened on a Friday night, late. Liam had had a difficult afternoon. The treatment's effects peaking in a way that had required an additional medication adjustment and a visit from Dr. Holt. And by 9 o'clock, he was in a deep, exhausted sleep that Evelyn recognized as the kind that would hold until morning. She sat in her chair for a while watching him, and then she got up and went into the hallway. Nathan was there. He'd stepped out an hour ago to make a call. She'd heard him, his voice low, dealing with something work-related in the corridor. And he was still there when she came out, standing by the window at the end of the hall, where you could see the hospital parking lot, and beyond it, the lights of Millhaven at night. She walked down to the window and stood beside him. He's settled, she said. Good. He had his hands in his pockets. He was looking at the lights outside. His color was bad this afternoon. Dr. Holt said that's expected with the adjustment. He should stabilize over the weekend. I know, she told me. A pause. I've been reading about the procedure, the actual donation process. It's not as invasive as people think, mostly outpatient. I read that too. He turned to look at her. I'm not worried about the procedure, Evelyn. I'm going to do it. That's not what I'm... He stopped. Started again. I've been trying to figure out what to do with what I'm feeling, and I can't do it anymore without having the actual conversation. I've been trying to protect him from it, and I think that's right, but it's... He exhaled. I need to say some things. Okay, she said, without you explaining or apologizing in real time. I need to just say them. Okay. He turned back to the window. I've been going over it all week, the timeline. He said it like he'd been running numbers. You knew when we were in that courthouse. You'd known for 4 days. We signed the papers and you walked past me in that hallway, and I called your name and you didn't turn around. He paused. And you were pregnant. She didn't say anything. She had agreed not to, and she kept the agreement. I've asked myself if I would have changed anything, if you'd told me. Another pause. And the answer is, I don't know. We were done, Evelyn. You know that. What we had, or what we'd turned it into by the end, it wasn't working, and we were both miserable trying to pretend otherwise. He stopped. But the decision about what to do with that information was mine to make too, and you made it for me. Yes, she said. She'd said this before. She said it again because it was still true, and she wasn't going to qualify it. And then 6 years. He rubbed the back of his neck. I keep doing the math. He was born in July, so that would have been July 22nd. He was quiet. She hadn't meant to say the date specifically. It had come out before she could decide not to. July 22nd, he said, quietly. He came 2 days late. The 22nd was the estimate. He stood with that for a moment. What was it like? She looked at him. The birth? All of it, the beginning, being alone with it. The question wasn't accusatory exactly, it was something else. She recognized it. It was the question of someone who has been excluded from a story and is trying to find the beginning of it, even if finding it also means understanding exactly what was taken from them. Hard, she said, in ways I hadn't prepared for. She looked at the lights outside. I'd thought it through. I'd made a plan. I had Claire. I had money. The job was stable. I'd sorted out the practical dimensions of it. A pause. And then he arrived, and none of the practical dimensions were the point at all. You can plan for a baby in every material sense and still be entirely unready for the size of it. Were you scared? Constantly. I was scared for about 2 years straight. She paused. Less scared when he started talking, when he became specific, you know? When he started being himself rather than just this enormous responsibility. When did he start talking? 14 months. First word was more. He was in the high chair. He'd finished his food and he looked at me and said more like he was placing an order. Nathan made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, more like the sound of an image landing. That's very him, yeah. They were quiet for a bit. The parking lot below was nearly empty. A few cars, a light over the entrance, the distant movement of someone crossing the lot in a coat. I missed his first word, Nathan said. Not at her, just out loud. Yes. His first steps. He walked at 11 months, early. She said it because it was true, and he'd asked, in his way, for these things. He walked toward the coffee table, fell into it, sat down on the floor, thought about it for a minute, and then got up and did it again. God, Nathan said, softly. That's very him, too. He turned away from the window and leaned his back against the wall beside it, facing the empty corridor. He looked tired in a way that had less to do with the hour and more to do with the cumulative weight of the week, of every day arriving in that room and building something with Liam in real time, fast, with the urgency of a man who understood he was already 6 years behind and could not afford to waste a morning. I'm angry at you, he said. I'm going to keep being angry at you for a while. I need you to know that. I know. And I can be angry at you and still, he seemed to search for the right construction. And still think that he's... Another stop. He's extraordinary. What you did with him. How he is. He said it looking at the floor, like the words were being pulled from somewhere he hadn't intended to open. That's you. 6 years of that is you. And I can think that and still be furious that I wasn't part of it. Both things are true, she said. Yeah. He looked up at her. Both things are true. She wanted, in that moment, to say more. To explain the fear she'd carried all those years more fully. Not to excuse it, but because she was tired of it being only what it looked like from the outside, which was a choice she had made at his expense. It was that. It was also the thing she had done in the only way she knew how to do it, which was alone, because alone had always been where she was most sure of herself. She had converted her fear into competence, and her competence into a life for Liam, and she had told herself for 6 years that this was enough, and it was good, and she had done right by him. She had. She believed that still. She had also done wrong by Nathan, and by Liam in ways Liam hadn't articulated yet but would, someday. And she had done wrong by herself, by the version of herself that had torn a pregnancy test into pieces in a courthouse bathroom, and decided that the truest, most frightening thing in her life was something that could be disposed of along with the paper towels. I have to ask you something, Nathan said. Okay. Why didn't you... He stopped, tried a different angle. After the first year, or the second, when the situation with the divorce wasn't so raw, why not then? She'd asked herself this. She had a real answer. Because I'd already made the decision, she said, and reversing it would have meant handing you 6 months of his life, then a year, then 3. And every time I thought about calling you, there was more to give back, and the more there was, the more impossible it felt. It kept getting bigger. So you let it get bigger. I did. Until it was this big. Yes. He considered that. She could see him working through it, not accepting it, not forgiving it, but at least mapping the shape of it, trying to understand how something got to be this size. That's how you are, he said, and his voice had shifted into something less sharp. Not kind, not yet, just recognizing. You do that. When something feels unsolvable, I close around it, she said. I know. He looked at her. I used to think that was a strength. It's both, she said, like most things. He didn't respond to that immediately. He pushed off the wall and walked a few steps down the corridor and then came back. It was the kind of movement that meant he had more to say and wasn't sure he wanted to say it yet. When Liam's better, he said, we need to figure out what this looks like, him and me, going forward. Yes. I don't know what I want that to look like yet. I need time. That's fair, but I'm not. He stopped. I'm not going to be the kind of father who shows up twice a year for holidays. That's not. I can't do that. Not now. Not after this week. She had known this was coming. She had thought about it for days, lying in the reclining chair listening to Liam breathe, and she had made herself look at it honestly. I know, she said. That means some things are going to change. I know that too. You're okay with that? She looked at him. Nathan, he asked me if you were coming back. First day within an hour of you leaving. He's 6 years old and he has your jaw and your way of listening to people, and he already... She stopped. He already wants you in his life. Whatever I feel about what that means for mine, I'm not going to be the reason he doesn't have his father. A pause. I stopped being that reason the day I called you. He was quiet for a long moment. That must have been hard, he said. Not sarcastic, not generous either, just observing it accurately. Yes, she said. Was it the right call? Yes. He nodded slowly. Then, you should have called 6 years ago. Yes, she said. I know. They stood in the corridor outside room 614 in the particular stillness of a hospital after 10 o'clock, and they did not resolve anything further because there was nothing else that could be resolved in a hallway on a Friday night. What had been broken between them was something much larger than a conversation, and they both understood that. But this was a start, not a warm one, not a comfortable one, but an honest one, which was more than they'd managed in the last 2 years of their marriage. You should get some sleep, Nathan said finally. You look like you haven't slept properly in a week. I haven't slept properly since he was born, she said. Something crossed his face. There and gone. Get some rest. I'll be here at 7. He left. She stood in the hallway for a moment and then went back into Liam's room and settled into the reclining chair and pulled the blanket over herself. She lay there looking at the ceiling. The monitor beeped its slow, steady rhythm. Liam's breathing was even and deep. She closed her eyes. The procedure itself was scheduled for a Tuesday, 12 days after Nathan had first walked out of that elevator. The days leading up to it had their own texture. Liam's preparatory treatment had done what it was supposed to do, and while it had taken a visible toll, he was thinner, more easily tired, with a fragility he wore impatiently, like a coat that didn't fit. He was stable. Dr. Holt was satisfied. The plan held. Nathan spent the Saturday before the procedure at the hospital from morning through evening, which was not unusual by then. What was unusual was that he'd brought things: a bag with a portable chess set, 2 books that he explained were ones he'd liked when he was around Liam's age, and a packet of drawing pens in a range of colors that Liam had not previously had access to. Liam opened the pens with the focused intensity of someone receiving something they hadn't known to ask for. These are the real kind, he said. He held up a dark green one, the ones that don't run. I figured the cheap ones probably frustrate you, Nathan said. Liam looked at him. They do. He uncapped the green pen and made a test mark on the corner of his sketchbook. The line was clean and precise. His face went through a small transformation. Yeah, he said. These are good. I thought you'd like them. Liam spent the rest of the morning drawing with a concentration so absolute that he barely looked up for lunch. Nathan sat beside him and read one of the books he'd brought. a battered copy of something Evelyn couldn't see the title of clearly, with an ease that looked like someone settling into a chair they'd been sitting in for years. Evelyn watched them from across the room and felt something she had no clean language for. It was not guilt exactly, though guilt was part of it. It was not relief, though that was part of it too. It was something about watching a relationship take root in real time, fast and a little ragged, because it had to be, because the circumstances wouldn't give them the luxury of gradual. Liam had simply decided that Nathan was his, the way Liam decided most things, without drama, by some internal assessment process that she would never entirely understand, and then completely. And Nathan had received that decision with a seriousness that Liam deserved, and that she had not been sure he'd be capable of, under the circumstances. She had been wrong about that. She had been wrong about some things. Not everything. She didn't think she'd been wrong about everything. But enough. On Sunday, Claire came by again, and this time the interaction between her and Nathan had shifted slightly. Less careful, less charged. They talked about Liam, mostly, and about what recovery would look like after the procedure, and at one point Nathan said something dry and self-deprecating about his complete ignorance of children before this week, and Claire said, "You're picking it up fast." And it was not entirely warm, but it was not cold either, and Evelyn noted it. On Monday, the day before the procedure, Dr. Holt walked them through the final plan. Nathan would have cells harvested that afternoon, a process more straightforward than people imagined, and those cells would be used in Liam's treatment the following morning. She expected the procedure itself to take 3 to 4 hours. Liam would need to be monitored closely for several days afterward, but if his body responded as Dr. Holt anticipated, they could expect to begin seeing indicators of improvement within 2 weeks. "And if it doesn't work?" Liam asked. Dr. Holt looked at him directly. "Then we look at other options. But I don't want to spend our energy on that today. I want to spend it on what we're doing tomorrow, which I believe is going to work." Liam accepted this. He looked at Nathan. "You're not scared?" "I'm a little scared," Nathan said. "Me too." Liam thought about it. "But I think it's going to be okay." "Yeah," Nathan said. "I think so too." After Dr. Holt left and the afternoon moved into evening, Nathan went to have his cells harvested. He was gone about 2 hours. When he came back, he looked tired and slightly pale himself, and Liam, who was half awake by then, observed this with proprietary concern. "You look like I look," Liam said. "Little bit," Nathan agreed. "Does it hurt?" "Not much. I'm okay." Liam looked at him for a moment with that reading-the-room attention of his. "Thank you," he said. He said it simply, the way he said everything important, without build-up, without drama, just the thing itself laid out plainly. Nathan sat down in his chair beside the bed. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I know I don't have to." Liam settled back against his pillow. "I want to." The room was quiet. Outside, the February night had come down fully. No light at the edge of the sky now, just the dark. Evelyn sat in her chair and Nathan sat in his, and Liam drifted back toward sleep between them, and they held the quiet together, this man and this woman who had broken something that could not quite be rebuilt the way it was, and who were building something else instead, imperfectly. One difficult, honest day at a time, around the small, specific person who was the only reason any of them were in this room, and who was, despite everything, already something neither of them could imagine being without. Nathan looked at Evelyn across the bed. She looked back. No words. Just that, the acknowledgement, across the sleeping child between them, that they were both here, that they were both still standing, that tomorrow was coming, and they would face it the same way they'd faced this entire week, imperfectly, uncomfortably, without the benefit of a script. It was enough for tonight. It had to be. They took Liam down at 7:45 in the morning. He was awake and quiet, which was more unnerving than if he'd been frightened. Liam processed things internally before he expressed them, and what Evelyn saw on his face as the orderlies came in with the transport bed was the face of a boy who had already done whatever internal accounting he needed to do and had arrived at a position he could hold. Serious, present, not performing bravery, just settled in it, the way he settled into most things that mattered to him. He let Evelyn hold his hand as they moved him. He let Nathan walk on the other side of the transport bed, close enough that Liam could see him without turning his head. At the doors to the procedure suite, which were the kind that didn't open for parents, Liam looked at Evelyn first. "Don't cry in the waiting room," he said. "I wasn't planning to." "You're planning to." He looked at her with the precision of someone who had spent 6 years being her primary witness. "It's okay if you do. Just don't do it where other people can see because then they feel like they have to say something." She squeezed his hand. "When did you get so practical?" "You," he said. Not an accusation, just attribution. Then he looked at Nathan. This part was newer. The easy, unself-conscious way he'd started directing his gaze at Nathan, as though Nathan had always been one of the people he looked to. It had happened gradually over the past 2 weeks, this small recalibration, and every time Evelyn witnessed it, she felt the complexity of it as a physical thing, somewhere in her sternum. Pride and grief, and the particular guilt of someone who knows they delayed something good. "You'll be here when I come out?" Liam asked Nathan. "Right here," Nathan said. "Okay." Liam looked at the ceiling, then back at the two of them. "Okay," he said again, more to himself. The door opened. The transport bed moved forward. Evelyn let go of his hand at the last possible moment, and the door swung shut, and that was that. She stood looking at the closed doors. Nathan stood beside her looking at them too. "Come on," he said after a moment. He didn't touch her. There had been no physical contact between them since he'd arrived. Not once, by some unspoken mutual understanding, but he gestured toward the waiting area with a slight tilt of his head. "Let's sit down." The waiting room for the pediatric procedure suite was a small, beige-carpeted space with chairs along 2 walls and a table with magazines that no one ever read. There was a television mounted in the corner showing a morning news program with the sound off and the captions running. There was a family in the far corner, a grandmother and a man who might have been her son, both staring at their phones, not speaking. There was a woman by the window reading an actual physical book, which gave Evelyn an irrational sense of solidarity. She and Nathan took chairs along the left wall, leaving one empty between them by instinct, then both noticing the empty chair at the same moment, and neither saying anything about it. Claire arrived 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath, her coat still wet from outside. She'd come straight from dropping her kids at school. She looked at the two of them sitting in adjacent chairs, and her face did the thing it did when she was absorbing information she'd already halfway anticipated. "How'd he look?" she asked, sitting down on Evelyn's other side. "Good," Evelyn said. "He told me not to cry visibly." "That's my boy," Claire said, and her voice wavered just slightly on the last word, which was the closest Claire had come to falling apart in front of Nathan, and she recovered from it quickly by taking out her phone and appearing to read something. The three of them sat. The news program cycled through its segments silently. The grandmother in the corner received a call and stepped out. The woman with the book turned a page. Nathan got up once and came back with 3 coffees from the machine in the hallway. Not the good kind, the machine kind, the kind that tasted like hot water that had been near coffee at some point in its history. He handed one to each of them and sat back down. Evelyn drank it without complaint. Under the circumstances, the bad coffee felt appropriate. Suffering scaled to occasion. "How long did Dr. Holt say?" Claire asked. 3 to 4 hours, Evelyn said. "Maybe longer." Claire looked at her watch. It was 8:22. She put her watch away. Yeah, the first hour was the worst. It had the texture of time moving through something thick. Every minute individually felt, no natural momentum. Evelyn read nothing, looked at her phone twice and put it away both times, and spent considerable mental energy not imagining the procedure room in any kind of visual detail. Nathan sat beside her and did something on his phone for a while. Email, she assumed, the work he'd been managing remotely for 2 weeks, the project in Arden that had gone on without him. Then he put his phone away and sat with his hands in his lap, looking at nothing in particular, which was, she realized, the same posture she'd described to her therapist years ago as his not talking but not absent posture. She hadn't thought about that in years. She hadn't thought about her therapist in years either, which was probably an oversight. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He looked at her. "Sure." After the divorce. What did you do? He was quiet for a moment, reading the question. You mean in general? In the first year, he exhaled. Worked. Moved around a little. I sublet an apartment in the city for about 8 months, which was... He paused. I don't know. I thought being somewhere with more going on would help. It didn't really. The problem wasn't geography. No, she agreed. Then I got offered a position with a firm in Arden, and I took it. Needed to build something from scratch somewhere. Fresh start, that whole thing. He said fresh start with a slight flatness that acknowledged the cliché without fully disowning it. It helped, actually, the work. It's a smaller company, more responsibility. Kept me occupied. Are you happy there? He thought about it. I'm okay there. It's not a forever thing. I don't know what the forever thing looks like. He paused. I haven't been good at the personal dimensions. Since the divorce. Dating, all that. I've tried a few times. Nothing that... He stopped. Nothing that held. She didn't know what to do with this information, so she filed it neutrally. I haven't either. Dated, I mean. Much. Because of Liam? Partly. Mostly. She considered. It felt complicated to explain. I have a 6-year-old and his father doesn't know he exists is not a first date conversation that goes well. He made a short sound. Not quite a laugh. No, I'd imagine not. I told myself I'd figure it out when he was older, when it felt less... She stopped. When it felt less like a secret, Nathan said. She looked at him. Yes. He nodded slowly. The morning news program switched to weather. The woman with the book turned another page. Somewhere down the hall, a child was crying. Not in distress, just the ordinary crying of a small person who was tired and wanted something. And both of them heard it, and both of them said nothing. Claire went to find food at 10 o'clock, returning with packaged sandwiches from the hospital cafe that tasted approximately as good as the coffees had. They ate them anyway. The grandmother had come back and was now asleep in her corner chair with her mouth slightly open and her phone still in her hand. The family situation in the corner appeared to have resolved itself into waiting, the same as everyone else. At 10:40, Nathan said, "Tell me about when he started drawing." She looked at him. What? The drawing. It's so specific to him. I want to know when it started. She thought back. Around 2.5. He had crayons before that, but he wasn't interested in coloring inside the lines or drawing things that looked like things. But around 2.5, he started making shapes with actual intention, like he was working something out. She paused. The first thing he made that was clearly a picture of something was a bird. A circle with a triangle on it. He carried it around for a week. A bird even then, Nathan said. A bird even then. Something softened in his face. What was he like at 2? She told him. She told him about the more phase that lasted approximately 8 months and encompassed more than just food, more time outside, more of a specific story he liked, more of her attention on demand. She told him about the way Liam had learned to walk by, hurling himself at furniture and then at open space, so convinced of the principle that the mechanics would follow that they somehow did. She told him about the morning she'd found Liam at 18 months old standing in his crib at 6 a.m. Not crying, just standing there in the early light, apparently thinking, and how she'd watched him from the doorway for 2 full minutes before he noticed her, and how even at 18 months the expression on his face had been identifiably Liam, private, concentrated, working through something. Nathan listened to all of it without interrupting, the way he'd listened to everything in this hospital. The way she remembered now, he had always listened when something mattered to him. It was the thing she'd loved first about him, before she loved anything else. This quality of actual attention, the way you could tell he was absorbing what you said rather than waiting for his turn. She had forgotten it in the last years of their marriage, when the attention had turned selective, when some of what she said seemed to reach him, and some of it seemed to stop somewhere before it arrived. Somewhere in the deterioration of things between them, she had come to assume the latter was the default. She had been wrong, or at least it wasn't the whole truth. He was listening now. He was doing it the way he'd always done it at the beginning, all of it, taking it in, making it count. She kept talking. She told him about the first day of preschool, which Liam had handled with a composure that had made his teacher raise her eyebrows, and had made Evelyn cry in the car on the way home where Liam couldn't see her. She told him about the dog campaign, which had begun when Liam saw a neighbor's golden retriever at age 4, and had since escalated into a multi-pronged lobbying effort involving drawings of prospective dogs, detailed arguments for why a dog would be good for Evelyn's mental health, and at one point a written list titled Reasons for Dog in Liam's careful block printing that he'd left on her pillow. "He left it on your pillow," Nathan said, weighted down with a rock from the park. "That's—" He shook his head slightly. "That's exactly what I would have done. At his age." "I know," she said. He looked at her. "Is that why you said he comes by the organizational instinct honestly?" "That and other things." She paused. "You're very similar in the ways that are hardest to live with." He thought about that. What does that mean? It means he decides things and then they're decided. There's no revisiting. Once he's made his mind up about something, you're managing the fallout of that decision, not the decision itself. She paused. He decided you were his father within an hour of meeting you. That was that. Nathan was quiet. And the hard part of that? The hard part is when the decision is wrong. She looked at the floor. Or when the person who made it doesn't tell you the full truth about something important. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Are you talking about him or about yourself?" "Both," she said. Dr. Holt appeared in the doorway of the waiting room at 11:58. Evelyn saw her first and was on her feet before she'd consciously decided to stand. Nathan was up half a second later. Claire, who had been dozing lightly, startled awake. Dr. Holt's face was composed, but not tight. Not the careful neutrality of bad news being managed. Something easier than that. Something that, as she crossed the room toward them, resolved itself into the expression of a doctor who has done what she set out to do. "He did well," she said. "He's out of the procedure. Everything went as planned, and his initial response in recovery is encouraging." Evelyn heard Claire exhale sharply beside her. "When can we see him?" Nathan asked. "He'll be in recovery for another hour, maybe 90 minutes. He's sedated and he needs that time. But he's stable and he's comfortable, and you can see him as soon as he's moved back to his room." "Is there anything—" Evelyn started. "Not right now, there isn't. You wait, and then you go see your boy." Dr. Holt looked at them both. At the two of them standing there, Nathan slightly in front, Evelyn beside him, the gap between them smaller than it had been at the start of the morning. "The next 2 weeks will tell us a lot. But today went well. Sit down. Eat something if you haven't. He's going to want you awake when he wakes up." She left. The three of them stood there for a moment. Claire put her arm around Evelyn, and Evelyn let her, leaning slightly into it in the way she almost never allowed herself. Over Claire's shoulder, she could see Nathan, who had sat back down in his chair and put his face briefly in his hands. Not for long, just for the span of a few seconds, the posture of someone releasing something they'd been holding in place by main force for several hours. She didn't look away. Liam came around slowly, the way children do after sedation. Not a clean waking, but a gradual surfacing, with stops along the way. He was back in his room by 1:30, still mostly under when they first came in. Evelyn sat beside him. Nathan took his usual chair. Claire sat in the corner and sent texts to Dana, updating her. The room was quiet. At 2:15, Liam's eyes opened. Not all the way. Halfway, the heavy-lidded half-consciousness of someone swimming up from a long way down. He looked at the ceiling. Then he moved his eyes to Evelyn. "Hey," he said. His voice was thick and slow. "Hey, baby. Did it work?" "Too early to know for sure, but Dr. Holt says it went really well." He processed this. His eyes moved to Nathan. "You're still here." "Told you I would be," Nathan said. Liam looked at him for a moment. "You look tired," he said. "You just had a procedure and you're worried about how I look." "Someone has to." His eyes were closing again. "There's nobody to worry about you." The sentence landed in the room without drama, the way Liam's observations always did. He was already half asleep again before anyone could respond to it, drifting back under with the guileless efficiency of the heavily medicated. But the words sat there in the quiet after he was gone. "There's nobody to worry about you." And both Evelyn and Nathan heard them, and neither of them looked at the other. Outside the window, February was doing something unusual. The sky had cleared over the course of the morning, and there was actual sunlight now, thin and pale and provisional, the kind that late winter produces as a preview rather than a promise. It angled through the window and fell across the foot of Liam's bed in a stripe of white gold light. Evelyn watched it move, almost imperceptibly, as the afternoon went on. Nathan stayed until 9 that night. Liam woke up properly at around 4, groggy and uncomfortable, but oriented, and in his way, immediately interested in information. How had the procedure gone exactly? What happened during the part he was sedated for? What did encouraging response mean in specific medical terms? Dr. Holt came by at 5 and answered his questions with her characteristic directness, and Liam nodded after each answer with the satisfaction of someone receiving a briefing they'd requested. "So now we wait," Liam said. "Now we wait," Dr. Holt confirmed. "I'm good at waiting," Liam said. He did not appear to be performing this statement. He seemed to actually believe it, which was remarkable given the evidence of 6 years of dog lobbying. After Dr. Holt left, Nathan pulled out the portable chess set he'd brought the previous Saturday. He'd been teaching Liam the basics in the afternoons over the past week, short sessions that Liam had taken to with the intensity he brought to anything spatial and rule-based. "You up for a game?" Nathan asked. "I just had a procedure," Liam said. "I know, we can do a short one." Liam looked at the chess set. "You'll go easy on me?" "I'll try." "Don't," Liam said. "I don't want you to go easy. I want to actually learn." Nathan set up the board. Evelyn watched them from her chair. Liam propped against his pillows, still pale, still moving carefully, studying the board with the focused intensity he brought to all his drawings. Nathan leaning forward with his elbows on the edge of the bed, pointing at pieces, explaining, asking questions back. They spoke to each other in the low, specific register of two people working on something together, and Evelyn noticed, watching them, that Nathan was not going easy. He was genuinely playing, and when Liam made a bad move, he said so, and explained why, and Liam did not seem bothered by this at all. She thought about what Liam had said when he first described Nathan to her. He listens. Not like he's being polite. She thought about all the things you couldn't know about a person in advance, all the ways someone might surprise you if you gave them the chance to. She had not given Nathan the chance. She had made a decision in a courthouse bathroom based on who she believed him to be, and she had not been entirely wrong. But she had also not been entirely right, and the difference between those two things had cost all three of them more than she had fully reckoned with. She was reckoning with it now. In real time, in a hospital room in February, watching her former husband teach their son the Queen's movements across a plastic chessboard. She didn't look away from it. She had developed, over the past 2 weeks, a practice of not looking away from the difficult things in this room. It was harder than it sounded. It was also, she was beginning to understand, the only thing she had to offer that was worth anything. Marchas. After Liam was asleep and Nathan had begun gathering his things for the walk to the Marriott, Evelyn said, "How much longer can you stay?" "In Arden. At work." He paused, his jacket half on. "I've talked to them. They're flexible. The current project doesn't need me on site for another 2 weeks at least. And after that? I don't know. We figure it out." He finished putting on his jacket. "He's going to need monitoring. Recovery isn't just the procedure. It's the weeks after. I'm not going to be in Arden while that's happening." "What does that mean practically?" "It means I'll keep the hotel for now. We see how the next 2 weeks go." He picked up his bag. "And then we have the conversation about what the permanent arrangement looks like." She nodded. The permanent arrangement. The phrase had weight, all the complexity of 2 cities and shared custody, and a child who had been wholly hers for 6 years and was now, incontrovertibly, not only hers. She'd known this was coming. She'd been walking toward it for 2 weeks. It still landed with more weight than she'd prepared for. "Nathan," she said. He stopped. "I don't want to fight you on the time. Whatever you want, whatever you need to ask for, in terms of being part of his life. I'm not going to make it harder than it has to be." She said it carefully, because she meant it carefully. It was not an easy thing to say, and she wanted him to hear that it wasn't. I owe you that much. He looked at her for a long moment. You owe me a lot more than that, he said. But he said it without the edge it might have had 2 weeks ago. It was just the truth, acknowledged. I know. But he stopped, looked at Liam, sleeping. That helps, knowing that. He looked back at her. It makes it easier to think about what this can be, instead of just what it's been. She held his gaze. Is that possible? Thinking about what it can be? He considered it. Really considered it. She could see him doing it, the same way he'd considered her question about whether an apology was worth something, the same slow, honest accounting he'd been doing all along. I think so, he said finally. Not yet, but I think so. He left. She listened to his footsteps down the corridor, then the elevator, then nothing. She sat in the dim room with the monitor beeping its steady rhythm and her son's quiet breathing, and she thought about what not yet meant and what it might become. The thin stripe of afternoon sunlight was long gone. The room was still, but the stillness felt different from the stillness of 2 weeks ago, when she'd sat alone in this same chair before she made the call, before the door she'd kept closed for 6 years swung open, and everything that had been sealed inside it came pouring out into the light. The old stillness had been the stillness of something contained. This was the stillness of something that had been let go of. Unruly, unresolved, but out in the open now, where it could at least be looked at and tended and gradually, imperfectly addressed. She wasn't sure which kind of stillness was harder to sit with. She was learning, slowly, that hard to sit with and wrong to sit with were not the same thing. She pulled her blanket over herself. She looked at Liam's face, slack with sleep, the jaw that was Nathan's and the dark eyes that were hers shut against the world for now, just resting, just being a small person who had been through a large thing and was getting through the other side of it. She put her hand on the rail of his bed, not touching him, just close. You're going to be okay, she said quietly, to the sleeping room. She said it the way she had said it 100 times in 6 years, in the dark, alone, to this child who was everything she'd built her life around. But this time, for the first time, it didn't feel like something she was saying to convince herself. It felt like something she actually believed. The first sign came on day 9. Dr. Holt appeared in the doorway at 8 in the morning with the kind of expression that takes years of medical training to keep that neutral, and Evelyn, who had become fluent in Dr. Holt's face over the past 3 weeks, felt something shift in her chest before a single word was spoken. His counts, Dr. Holt said. We're seeing movement. Nathan was already on his feet. He'd arrived at 7:15 as he always did, coffees in hand, and he'd been sitting in his chair reading something on his phone while Liam slept the deep, uninterrupted sleep that had replaced the broken, feverish nights of the preparatory weeks. What kind of movement? The right kind. She came fully into the room and stood at the foot of the bed with Liam's chart, and she showed them the numbers, and she explained what each one meant, and Evelyn understood about half of it and understood the rest from Dr. Holt's face, which had allowed itself, just slightly, just at the edges, to show something that was not quite a smile, but was the controlled precursor to one. It's early. I want to be clear about that. We have at least another week of close monitoring before I'm willing to say anything definitive. But this is what we were hoping to see. This is the trajectory we wanted. Liam woke up in the middle of this, the way he sometimes did, not gradually but all at once, eyes open, immediately present. He looked at Dr. Holt. He looked at his parents standing on either side of his bed. He read the room with the speed of someone who had been reading rooms since he could focus. Good news? He said. Possibly, Dr. Holt said. Encouraging news. He considered the distinction. What's the difference? Good news is confirmed. Encouraging news is headed in the right direction. Okay. He looked at Evelyn. You're doing the thing. What thing? Where you try not to look too relieved because you don't want to jinx it. She looked at her son, pale still, thinner than he'd been a month ago, his dark hair slightly lank from too many days without a proper shower, Masao, and felt the precise, specific weight of loving someone so completely that their capacity to read you accurately felt like its own kind of miracle. I'm trying, she said. It's okay to look relieved, he said. Dr. Holt said encouraging, That's not nothing. No, she agreed. It's not nothing. He looked at Nathan. You okay? Nathan had sat back down. His hands were clasped between his knees, and he was looking at the chart Dr. Holt had set on the bedside table. And when Liam spoke to him, he looked up. Yeah, he said. His voice was slightly rougher than usual. I'm okay. Liam studied him for a moment with the frank attention of a child who has not yet learned to pretend he isn't looking. You look like you might cry. I'm not going to cry, Nathan said. That's what people say when they're going to cry. He thought about it. It's okay if you do. Mom cried in the parking garage when she thought I was asleep the second night. I wasn't asleep. Evelyn looked at him. Liam. It's not bad, he said. I'm just saying it's okay. He looked between them. This particular look he'd been giving them with increasing frequency over the past week. The one that assessed the space between them and appeared to be taking some kind of private measurement. You're both allowed. The next 9 days moved differently from the days before them. Still slow. Hospital time had its own gravitational rules, and nothing about Liam's recovery was going to be hurried, but with a different quality to the slowness, less like wading through something and more like watching something grow. Each morning, Dr. Holt brought numbers, and each morning the numbers were incrementally, stubbornly, encouragingly better, and the word encouraging gradually gave way to positive, and then, on the 17th day after the procedure, to significant progress, which was as close to good news as Dr. Holt was constitutionally willing to offer before she was certain. Liam started drawing again on day 12. Not the careful, sustained work of before, his stamina still flagged quickly, but small things, 20 minutes at a stretch, filling the corners of his sketchbook with studies of the window view, the chair shapes in the room, an increasingly detailed rendering of what appeared to be an albatross in flight. The return of the drawing was, for everyone who knew him, a more reliable health indicator than the blood work. He's getting better, Claire said to Evelyn on day 13, watching Liam work from the doorway. The bird is back. The bird was never not back, Evelyn said. He was drawing birds in his head the whole time. You know what I mean. I do. She looked at her son, bent over his sketchbook with the green pen Nathan had brought 3 weeks ago. Yeah, he's getting better. The shift in Liam's condition produced a corresponding shift in the room's atmosphere, a loosening of something that had been pulled tight since the night Evelyn sat in a parking garage with her phone in her hand and dialed a number she hadn't dialed in 6 years. The vigilance didn't disappear. It wouldn't, not for weeks, maybe months. But it relaxed from its emergency pitch into something more sustainable, and in the space that opened up, things that had been deferred by crisis began to demand their due. The conversation happened on a Wednesday evening, day 15, while Liam was in with the occupational therapist who came twice a week to do activities that kept him from going fully feral with boredom. Nathan and Evelyn were in the family lounge down the hall, the same room where Evelyn had stood at the window on the day she first called him, though she didn't say this, with cups of the bad vending machine coffee, because at this point the bad coffee had become a kind of ritual, a marker of the particular shape of their days here. I've been thinking about Arden, Nathan said. She waited. It doesn't make sense anymore. The job is fine. The work is good. But I built it as a fresh start in a place with no particular connection to my life. And now the place with the most connection to my life is here. He wrapped his hands around the paper cup. Liam is here, which means I need to be here, or closer to here. That's the reality. You'd leave Arden. I'd leave Arden. He said it without drama, as though the decision had already been processed and he was just reporting the outcome. I've done the math. Millhaven has 2 firms I could approach, and there's another in Dalton, which is 40 minutes out. One of the Millhaven firms reached out to me about a year ago, and I wasn't interested then. I'll call them. She looked at him. You've already thought all of this through. I've had 3 weeks of hospital waiting rooms. A pause. And I'm not the kind of person who waits to make a decision once I know what it is. No, she said. You're not. He looked at her over the cup. Does that complicate things for you, me being in Millhaven? She thought about the honest answer and gave it. I don't know yet, probably. In some ways. She paused. But the alternative complicates more. Liam being 2.5 hours from his father. Liam being 2.5 hours from his father, she confirmed. Nathan nodded. He drank some of the coffee and made no comment on its quality, which was its own kind of endurance at this point. I'm also going to want something formal. Eventually. Custody arrangement, legal recognition. I need to be on record as his father. Not just here in this hospital. I know. She'd known this was coming since the first week. I'll talk to Diane, my attorney. She'll know the right way to approach it. We won't have to fight about it if we agree up front. I don't want to fight about it. Neither do I. He stopped, tried again. I want him to know that I'm his father in every sense, legal, practical, present. I want him to be able to call me and know I'll answer. I want to be the person at his school events and his doctor appointments and his... He stopped again, and she saw in the stopping that he was doing what she'd watched him do the whole time he'd been here, holding the emotion at the point where it became manageable, not suppressing it, but not letting it run ahead of him either. 6 years, he said quietly. I can't get those back, but I can make sure that what comes next doesn't have gaps in it. Yes, she said. That's what I want too, for him. For him, Nathan said. He looked at her. What about for you? The question landed differently from how she'd expected. It wasn't an accusation or complication. It was genuine. A direct question asked by a man who had been paying attention for 3 weeks and had noticed things. She wasn't sure she'd expected that. She wasn't sure what she'd expected anymore from Nathan, which was part of the problem, and also she was beginning to understand part of something else. I don't know yet, she said. I've spent 6 years organizing my life around Liam and around the architecture of not telling you. Both of those things are changing now. She looked at her hands. I'm going to have to figure out what I am when I'm not only his mother and not only someone managing a secret. You were always other things, Nathan said. You just didn't let them take up much space. She looked at him. You remember that? I remember a lot of things. He said it evenly, without sentimentality. We weren't good at the end. I know that. I was difficult to live with in ways I didn't fully understand then. The way I pulled back when things got hard. The way I said things I hadn't thought all the way through. He paused. That thing I said in the courtroom. I never loved you the way you needed. She went very still. I've thought about it, he said. A lot, actually, over the years. And I think I said it because I believed it in that moment. And I also think I said it because I wanted to believe it, because it made it easier. He looked at the window. It wasn't entirely true. The lounge was quiet. The fluorescent light buzzed almost imperceptibly. Somewhere down the hall, a cart was being wheeled on a hard floor. Nathan, she started. I'm not saying that to complicate anything, he said. I'm not saying it to... He exhaled. I'm saying it because you've been honest with me for 3 weeks about things that cost you to be honest about, and I owe you the same. That's all. She sat with it. The admission, the way he'd held it for 6 years, the way she'd held her own things. The symmetry of it was not lost on her. 2 people who had managed their truths privately for 6 years, sitting in a hospital lounge over bad coffee, laying them down one at a time. We were terrible at talking to each other, she said finally. By the end, yes. We were good at it once. We were, he said. We got out of the habit. Among other things. He was quiet for a moment. Among other things. He looked at her. I don't know what any of this is. Between us. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying it wasn't as simple as I made it sound in that courthouse. And I should have said that a long time ago, and I'm saying it now. She nodded slowly. She thought about what it would have meant to hear it 6 years ago, in that hallway, before she walked out into the November air. She thought about the test in her pocket. She thought about the choice she'd made and all the consequences of it, spreading out across 6 years like rings in water. We can't go back, she said. No. But I think... She stopped, felt her way forward. I think what we're building now for Liam is something real. And if we do it honestly, if we stay honest with each other the way we've been these past weeks, then maybe that's enough of a foundation, for whatever it is. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. Enough of a foundation for what? She met his eyes. for figuring out the rest. He held her gaze. Then, slowly, he nodded. Once. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't a beginning. It was something more provisional and more honest than either of those things. Two imperfect people, sitting at the edge of the damage they'd done to each other and to themselves, deciding that the damage was not the final word. Liam was discharged on a Friday morning, 22 days after he'd been admitted. Dr. Holt signed the papers with the efficiency of someone who had been planning this moment for a week, and was pleased to have arrived at it. She went through the discharge instructions in detail, the follow-up schedule, the activity restrictions, the signs to watch for, the medication protocol, and Liam listened to all of it with his sketchbook open on his lap, occasionally making notes in the margin in a handwriting that was still slightly unsteady from the weeks of lying down. "You're taking notes," Dr. Holt observed. "So I know what to watch for myself," he said. "People don't always tell you things in the moment. Better to already know." Dr. Holt looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked back at her with the expression of someone who has been receiving this observation about Liam in various forms for most of his life. "He's right," Dr. Holt said. "That's a very practical approach." "Thank you," said Liam, and went back to his notes. Nathan had arrived that morning with the car, his car, an unremarkable gray sedan that Evelyn hadn't seen before, because the plan they'd worked out over the past week was that he would drive them home, help get Liam settled, and then return to the Marriott for a few more days before going back to Arden to give notice and begin the process of moving. It was a plan made of logistics, held together by the mutual agreement that logistics were what they were capable of right now, and that the rest would be built from the logistics outward. They loaded Liam into the car with his sketchbook and his bird encyclopedia and the portable chess set that Nathan had given him, which Liam had already declared his permanent property in a tone that had not been contested. Claire followed them in her own car. She'd insisted on being there for the homecoming, as she had been there for almost everything over the past 3 weeks, which was Claire in its entirety, the person who showed up and kept showing up and asked very few questions and made very few demands and simply stayed, which was the most important thing and also the hardest. The drive to Evelyn's apartment was 20 minutes. Liam spent it with his face against the window, looking at the city going past with the focused attention of someone reacquainting themselves with the ordinary world after a period of enforced removal. It was a gray morning, still cold, the particular late winter gray that wasn't quite over, but wasn't getting worse either. "It looks the same," Liam said. "What does?" Evelyn asked. "Everything." He watched a man walking a dog on the sidewalk. "I thought it would look different. It's only been 3 weeks. Felt longer." He was quiet for a moment. "That dog is a lab mix, probably 2 years old. See how he moves?" "I'm not a dog expert," Evelyn said. "You should become one," Liam said. "It's useful." From the driver's seat, Nathan made a sound that was definitely a laugh, brief and genuine, and Evelyn looked at his face in the rearview mirror and caught the tail end of it. The smile that came after, the one that was, she realized, the same smile Liam wore when he'd said something he knew was funny and was trying to underplay it. She looked away before he noticed her looking. The apartment felt both smaller and larger than it had before. Smaller because it had been just the two of them for 6 years, Evelyn and Liam, and the rooms were sized to that. And now there were 4 of them maneuvering around each other, larger because Liam was moving through it with the specific relish of someone returning to their own things after too long away. He went methodically through his room, inventorying his notebooks, his jars of pens, the shelf of nature books, the particular pillow he'd been asking about in the hospital for 2 weeks. He picked up each thing briefly, put it back, moved to the next. "Everything's here," he announced to no one in particular. "Where would it have gone?" Evelyn asked from the doorway. "Sometimes things move when you're not watching," he said, with the serenity of someone who had decided this was true and wasn't interested in debating it. Claire made soup. She'd arrived before them and had it going on the stove, which was the thing Claire did when she didn't know what else to do, which was feed people. She and Evelyn stood in the kitchen while the soup finished, close enough to talk quietly. "How are you?" Claire said. "Ask me again in a month." "I'm asking you now." Evelyn leaned against the counter. It's a lot to hold." All of it. She looked toward the living room where Nathan and Liam had settled on the couch with the chessboard. She could hear their voices. Nathan explaining something, Liam disagreeing with it in the particular way he disagreed with things, which was to say, confidently, with follow-up questions. But I think we're going to be okay. All three of us. Claire stirred the soup. And the two of you? That's a longer answer. I have time. I don't have it yet. Evelyn watched the living room through the doorway. We broke something. We broke it in a lot of different ways and at different times, and some of it was him and most of it was me, and I don't know what you build from that. I don't know if you build from it or you just... She stopped. Build adjacent to it. Something new. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Claire said. No, Evelyn agreed. They're not. From the living room, Liam said, That's not how the night moves, with great conviction, and Nathan said, It is, actually, and Liam said, Show me again. And there was the small sound of chess pieces being repositioned on a board. Evelyn and Claire stood in the kitchen listening to this, and neither of them said anything else about it, because nothing else needed to be said. Nathan left at 5 o'clock. He'd helped Liam set up the chessboard in his room. They'd started a game they couldn't finish, which Liam had documented in his sketchbook with a diagram of the current position so neither of them would forget it. And he stood in the hallway with his jacket on, the way he always stood when he was preparing to leave, the slight forward lean of someone who moves efficiently and is already partly out the door. He said goodbye to Claire first. She gave him a brief, slightly awkward hug that he returned with similar brevity, and the general quality of that exchange was, We are not there yet, but we are somewhere, and somewhere is different from nowhere. He crouched down to Liam, who had followed him to the hallway with the undisguised intention of supervising the departure. 3 days, Nathan said. I'll be back Thursday. That's 72 hours, Liam said. Roughly. The chess game will still be set up. I know. I drew the diagram too. Liam looked at him. You drew it too? I didn't want to rely only on yours. No offense. Liam considered whether to be offended and decided against it. Smart, he said. He looked at Nathan with the direct, unmediated attention he gave to the people who mattered to him. I'm glad you came. When Mom called. Nathan held his gaze. Me too, he said. He said it simply, without qualifying it or protecting himself from it. And what Evelyn heard in those 2 words was the whole of it. The 3 weeks, the coffee, the chess lessons, the long nights in the hallway, the blood drawn for a child he'd never met who turned out to need precisely what he had to give. Liam nodded once, satisfied, as though an agreement had been formalized. Then he turned around and went back to his room the way he did when something was settled, complete and done and requiring no further ceremony. Nathan stood up. He and Evelyn were alone in the hallway. Thursday, he said. Thursday, she said. He looked at her. Not the way he'd looked at her in the courthouse 6 years ago. Not the careful, distancing look of someone who had practiced what to feel. Something that was still cautious, still carrying the weight of everything that had happened and hadn't happened, but without the wall behind it. He was just looking at her, seeing her. She looked back. Let him. We're going to mess this up sometimes, he said. You know that. There's going to be... He gestured vaguely at the space between them. We're not going to get it right every time. I know that. I just want to say it out loud, so we're not surprised when it happens. That's probably the most useful thing anyone has said about this, she said. He almost smiled. I'll see you Thursday. He left. She stood in the hallway for a moment and then went to check on Liam. He was at his desk, the bird encyclopedia open to a section on albatrosses, his sketchbook beside it. He was copying one of the photographs, the real photographs, the ones Claire had brought him, with slow, deliberate care, the green pen moving in small, controlled strokes. He didn't look up when she came in. How do you feel? She asked. Tired, he said without stopping. Good tired, not bad tired. You can tell the difference? Obviously. He studied the photograph, then added a line to the wing. Mom. Yeah. Are you going to be okay? She leaned against the doorframe. Yeah, baby. I'm going to be okay. You and Dad both? She heard the word dad and let it settle. He'd used it twice now, in the past week. Each time quietly, without announcement, testing the sound of it by simply using it. I think so, she said. It'll take time. Most things do, he said, with the placid certainty of someone who has received this as information and found it reasonable. She watched him draw for a while. The room was warm and dim, the winter evening coming on outside his window, the lamp on his desk making a small circle of yellow light. His head was bent, his shoulders were relaxed, his hand moved steadily across the page. He looked like himself. He looked like a boy who had been somewhere difficult and come back and was reacquainting himself with the work of being ordinary, which was the best work there was. I love you, she said. I know, he said. He looked up briefly, gave her the straight-faced look that was his version of the same thing, and went back to the albatross. Can you close the door? I need to concentrate. She pulled the door mostly closed and stood in the hallway, and the apartment was quiet around her. The good quiet. The quiet of things settling rather than being suppressed. She walked to the kitchen and finished the soup Claire had left, and ate it standing at the counter, looking out the window at the street below. Here's what she had learned, or what she was learning, in the way that real things are learned. Not all at once, but over time, tested repeatedly, revised in the light of evidence. A secret doesn't protect you from the consequences of the thing you're keeping secret. It only delays them, and in the delay it grows interest. Not like money, but like debt. What she had carried for 6 years as a private burden had always been a shared one. She had made it private by force, by the act of not telling, and she had told herself she was doing it for Liam, and partly she had been. And partly she had been doing it because the truth about the courthouse bathroom was a truth she didn't want to carry in front of someone who had standing to judge her for it. She had been afraid of Nathan's judgment. She had been afraid of her own. She had spent 6 years being afraid of what honesty would cost her, and it had cost her more than honesty ever could have. That was the thing she understood now in a way she hadn't before. Not intellectually, but in the body, the way you understand things that have actually happened to you. Fear of the truth doesn't make the truth smaller. It just makes the carrying of it heavier, and the longer you carry it, the more of you it takes up. She was not, at the end of this, a better person in some clean and completed sense. She had not been reformed or redeemed or rebuilt into something tidier. She was still someone who had walked out of a courthouse without saying the thing that needed to be said. That was always going to be true. What changed was not the past. Nothing ever changed the past, but her willingness to stand in the present without hiding behind it. She thought about Nathan, driving back through the winter evening to a hotel 3 blocks from the hospital where they'd all spent 3 weeks learning how to be something new. She thought about the way he'd looked when she first called him. The long silence, then which hospital, then nothing. The way he'd walked into room 614 and seen Liam for the first time and absorbed it without looking away. The way he'd sat in that waiting room for 4 hours without a word of anger, only presence. He was not a perfect person. He had never been one. But he was someone who had been handed something devastating and had shown up for it anyway, and that was, she'd come to understand, the measure that mattered. They were not going to put back together what had broken. That wasn't available to them, and she'd stopped pretending, somewhere in the long hospital nights, that it was what she wanted. What was available was this: the cautious, imperfect, daily work of building something from what remained, for the sake of the boy, in the other room who had his father's jaw and her eyes and some third quality that was entirely his own. The refusal to look away from hard things, the expectation of honesty, the willingness to say I like you and thank you, and that's not how the night moves with equal directness and equal conviction. Liam had not gotten those qualities because his life had been easy. He'd gotten them because his mother had done the best she could, and her best had not been perfect, not even close. But it had been real, and it had been consistent, and it had been full of the actual substance of love even when it was full of mistakes. That too was something she had learned. Love was not the absence of mistakes. Love was what remained present through them. 3 months later, Nathan moved to Mill Haven. He took the position with the firm he'd called from the hospital waiting room on a morning when Liam's numbers were going the right way and he'd had 20 minutes and a purpose. The work was good. He found an apartment 12 minutes from Evelyn's by car, close enough for Liam's sake and distinct enough for their own. He and Evelyn had worked out the arrangement with Diane and a mediator. No courtroom, no adversarial posture, just the two of them sitting across a table and figuring out the shape of what they owed each other and what they could give. The custody agreement gave Nathan alternating weeks and every other holiday, with flexibility built in because both of them were old enough to know that rigidity created the very conflicts it was supposed to prevent. Liam had been consulted in the appropriate way, not given a choice he was too young to carry, but included in the conversation in a way that respected his intelligence and his stake in the outcome. He had listened, asked 2 clarifying questions, and said, "Okay, but can we make sure we're all in the same city for my birthday? All 3 of us?" They had made sure. His first birthday after the hospital was in July, which was, Evelyn did not fail to notice, the month he was born and the month she had carried him home alone from a hospital very different from this one 7 years ago, believing she had made the only decision available to her and not understanding yet what it would cost. They had a birthday dinner. Evelyn and Nathan and Claire and Dana and the kids, and Liam, who blew out his candles with the same serious focus he brought to everything and then immediately wanted to talk about where all the air went when you blew them out, which led to a 15-minute conversation about physics that he'd clearly been planning to have and was using the birthday as an occasion for. "You planned that," Nathan said afterward when they were washing dishes in Evelyn's kitchen while Liam and Claire's kids demolished the living room. "What?" "The physics question. He set it up." Evelyn handed him a bowl to dry. "He's been thinking about it for a week. He asked me about combustion on Sunday." "And you knew he was going to bring it out at the table." "I suspected." Nathan dried the bowl. "You two have a whole... You've got a system." 6 years, she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm building one," he said. "I think." She looked at him. He was studying the bowl he'd just dried with the focused look of someone who is actually thinking about something else. "You are," she said. "I've been watching." He looked at her. "Yeah?" "He tells me things," she said, "about the time with you. He doesn't make a big deal of it. He just includes it. That's how you know with him. When something is actually part of his life, he just references it, like it's always been there." Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then, "Last week he showed me a drawing. A new one. He'd been working on it for a while, didn't show anyone. He showed me first." She looked at her hands in the soapy water. "What was it?" 3 people, Nathan said, standing together. "One of them's got these huge feet. I assume that's me. He told me I have big feet, which apparently he finds very funny. The middle one is small. The one on the other side has..." He stopped. "He drew her with her arms a little out, like she's ready for something. He told me that's how you stand when you're paying attention." She didn't say anything. "He said it took him a long time to get it right," Nathan said. "The 3 people. He kept starting over because he wanted it to look like they all fit together." A pause. "He said he thinks they do now." The kitchen was warm. From the living room came the sound of children and Claire's voice, and the particular chaos of a birthday that was going the way birthdays were supposed to go. Not perfectly, but fully, with everyone in it. Evelyn stood at the sink and thought about a courthouse bathroom, and a test torn into pieces, and a November morning when she walked out through a door and didn't turn back. She thought about 6 years of sleeping in a reclining chair and bad vending machine coffee, and the sound of her son's breathing in the dark. She thought about what it cost to hold a secret that size for that long, and what it felt like when you finally set it down, and how the setting down was not relief so much as exposure. The sudden awareness of the air on skin that had been covered. She thought about the word fit in the mouth of a 7-year-old who had looked at the people in his life and made something out of them, the way he made something out of everything. Not perfectly, but with attention and intention and the particular kind of stubbornness that looked like certainty from the outside and was, from the inside, just refusing to stop. She had done damage. She would always have done damage. That was not going to change, and she had stopped trying to find the angle from which it looked like it hadn't happened. What she had instead was this, the the present tense, the dishwater, the man drying a bowl 12 minutes from her apartment, the boy in the other room who had drawn 3 people and decided they fit together. You couldn't go back and make the right choice where you'd made the wrong one. You could only make the next choice as honestly as you were capable of, and the one after that, and keep going in that direction until the direction itself became the thing you were known for. That was what she had. It was not nothing. It was, in fact, the only thing that had ever mattered. Nathan put the bowl in the cabinet and handed her a dish towel. She dried her hands. "Come on," she said. "They're going to eat all the cake." "There's still cake?" "There's always cake. He made me get 2. "Of course he did," Nathan said, and they walked out of the kitchen together into the noise and the light.